Welcome back to Sci-Fi and Fantasy Read-Along. I'm ATN.
I'm Mule.
And I'm DM Phil.
Woo! I am really rusty now. I really don't feel like...
That's not rusty, it's rested.
Rested? I'm really rested right now, and I just don't know if I can come off of my vacation mode. Anyway, so this episode is dedicated to Adam Gray. You know why? Thank you, sir.
Well, you didn't say why.
I don't need to.
But then other people can be thanked at the beginning of the show.
We'll worry about that at the end, okay? We're here to talk about Isaac Asimov's Foundation today.
Yeah.
Episode 1, covering the first 8 chapters. Section 1, as it were. The Psychohistorians.
Why was this suggested?
That's a good
other
question.
than Asimov.
Yes, thank you for correctly pronouncing his name.
Is, very well respected.
Oh yeah, dude's classic. He's
He
one
wrote
of the
like
grandfathers of
1,000
sci-fi.
novels or something like that.
500 books.
Wrote papers and dissertations or something. Got his awards and scholarships
And whatever, right? None of that stuff matters. We're not actually going to talk about Isaac Asimov, okay? That's
I know,
why we're
but
here.
we should do him a little bit of credit here.
So, having said that, why do we choose this book is really what I'm saying.
I think that's a good question, and I think it should be directed exclusively at Philip.
Why?
Well, it was on your list, number 1.
Yeah, I blame you. You nominated it.
Oh, okay. So I nominated this, but here's why. So my experience with sci-fi has been very limited. So really, it's just based on exposure. Everybody's heard about Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke. Maybe some people have heard of Robert Heinlein. I never had until recently. Yeah, I know you're shaking your head because you're like, well, how could you not know that? Because they were called, those 3 guys were called the Big 3 back in the day. And I guess their combined efforts in the field of sci-fi kind of laid the foundation, no pun intended, foundation for sci-fi. And it's been influential for hundreds, thousands of writers throughout time, including, I don't know where to begin. Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek, George Lucas, Star Wars. And I will get there at a later point in time, but if you start reading these works, I'm like, oh my God, I've seen that in these sci-fi movies. And this is where it comes from. He's been influential to so many creative writers in science fiction moving forward. And I think that's kind of why this is important, or why we chose this.
So that's why you wanted to read this book.
Okay, why did you want to read it?
I'm asking. That's the whole of it, right? That's why, because you'd heard about him, you'd heard the rumors, his existence. You knew about the guy, and you're like, hey, I want to read that guy because he's really old and he's influential.
That's true, but I'm also like a literary historian in the fact that I like seeing where things come from to explain why we do the things the way we do now.
Well, why didn't we start with the Bible?
Interesting point. Mostly
we
because...
didn't want to fall asleep.
Yes.
Plenty of people have done that.
Snooze fest. Okay. Why did you... did you know about Foundation? Did you have any interest in reading Foundation before it was kind of forced upon you? Because it kind of was.
I've had an interest in Isaac Asimov before, and I never really got through it. It was back in my not finishing novels in my early years stage, and it always felt like a little beyond me, or like it was supposed to. But here I am.
Here I am.
Here I am. I forget which one I tried. It was a detective novel, I guess, about a guy that was investigating a robot's death, and a lot of the beginning of that story was about whether or not a murder could actually occur to, a life form that wasn't, alive.
Was that Caves of Steel by any chance?
I think that might have been the one, yeah. And it's all very interesting, and I really think about it a lot, and it kind of formulates my thoughts on science fiction and how the writing is kind of stilted and very... It's important to get, the concept out, but not necessarily in the most artful way.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem with science fiction.
But high in philosophy, and depending on what sci-fi you're reading, it can get really intense, and stuff that ever understand.
Now you've been forced to read Isaac Asimov.
I think it's forced. I mean, I'm really happy to. It's one of the reasons why I voted on it, of the list that we chose from.
Okay.
I'm excited, and already I feel like I've gained further understanding, and maybe it's Asimov more than other writers, but he's very thoughtful, and he tries to write a good book. I appreciate him.
He writes very clearly.
He does.
Yes. So, Philip, when you were going through the Wikipedia page on Isaac Asimov, did you get to the part that I was telling you about on the phone, about the literary criticism that James Gunn had done about him or on him?
Yes. What was your take on that?
That it's difficult to do literary criticism on Isaac Asimov because he does not hide anything from his reader. His style is to be extremely clear. And so that got me to thinking that, we're going to have to change tactics. I am going to have to change tactics when dealing with Isaac Asimov.
Well, coming right off of Stephen Erickson, yes.
Yeah, might not have been the best segue. This is going to be like a screeching halt and a 90-degree change of direction for anybody that came off of Game or Gardens of the Moon and follows us directly onto Foundation.
Well, I wonder, like, for instance, as a writer, he said that he only used an outline to write a story one time.
Yeah.
He tried it one time and he hated it. But he always just thought of an ending, and then he thought of a beginning, and then he just filled in the blanks.
So, I mean, we read the same thing. The thing that I took away from that whole Wikipedia page, like the thing that I liked the best was the advice that was given to him early on in his writing career by John W. Campbell, telling him to start his story as far into the plot as he possibly could. I thought that was interesting.
And he started at the end.
Essentially, yeah. You start as close to the climax as you can. Well, remember, he was writing stories in the beginning, right? You know, not novels. And this novel that we're reading is not a novel. It's a collection of stories that are linked together. You know, he was writing in the pulp days. 1942 is when the section that we're reading today and covering today was published originally in 1942 as a short story. And I think that chapter 1 was added at a later date to give us like more of an introduction to Gaul. And then, you know, but like chapter 2 to chapter 8, I believe that was the original short story.
Really? Yes, 8 short stories published in Astounding Magazine
over
between
a 3-year period.
More. 8-year period. It was May 1942 to January 1950.
That's the whole trilogy. The first book was 1942 to 1944.
Okay, I'm with you.
That blows my mind, just to let you know. You're telling me that, so the first chapter wasn't written, and the short story itself was just 2 through 8?
That was the impression I got from reading all the stuff I read yesterday about the original publication.
Could you imagine, like, back then? Okay, so you're a kid in the 40s and you're reading this, right?
Yeah, World War II is going on.
You read 2 through 8, you know, what we're reading right now today, basically, plus another chapter. Mm-hmm. And you're like, there is so much, you know. There's a lot of thoughts in there, for sure. And that's it. You don't have any other expectation that there's more to it.
I mean, I don't know. I have no idea how it originally looked to other people, like if there was a to be continued line or anything like that. I think the expectation was a lot of the stuff was serialized in that time period anyway. Mm-hmm. And so if it was good enough, they would solicit the second story from Isaac Asimov. And they did, obviously. There are a couple of things that we should probably talk about in the beginning. I think one of them we've already covered, and that was why are we reading this book. One thing that we need to add to that is that there is a high-dollar production. It's a miniseries by Apple TV, a 10-episode miniseries that's coming out based on this book. And I saw the trailer for that, and that is why I voted to read this book.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. You whore, you.
It is. The trailer was beautiful. The trailer was absolutely beautiful. And I mean, science fiction films have really kind of come into their own in the last 2 or 3 decades, you know, with graphics being what they are nowadays and our, you know, kind of expectation. of how to render science fiction. I mean, just look at Blade Runner as an example. You know, that's from 1982, the original Blade Runner, and it actually looked good. Yeah. 2001, Solaris. Like these are movies that look really, really good. And so they can do good science fiction now. And when I saw the trailer, I was like, okay, they're turning their attention to a classic of literature. Let's do it. Let's cover it. Let's get there.
And here we are.
Context for this novel, 1942. World War II is still going on. He's working at the Naval Yard in Philadelphia with Robert Heinlein and, his name is L. Sprague de Camp. Those guys. Three masterful science fiction writers working at the Naval Yard in Philadelphia at the same time.
You got to wonder how much they just sat and had coffee and talked about this stuff. And it blossomed their imaginations. You got to wonder.
You do got to wonder. Okay, so but part of this context that we need to talk about is that there are going to be things that we're going to read in this novel that really stand out because the book is 79 years old. So there's going to be references to technology and how things work that just do not come to pass, right? Well, I don't want to tell you what to do, but like I choose to overlook that stuff for the most part. My suspension of disbelief, that kind of thing. You know, it's like I have expectations when it comes to science fiction of that era. That, for example, there are going to be anachronisms. There are going to be wrong predictions. There's going to be defunct technology that was either never started or we found a better workaround sometime in the middle. You know, like there's going to be gadgetry. You know, there's like neat gadgets. There's going to be poorly drawn characters. I tend to expect that from science fiction. And then there's almost certainly going to be a plot twist that's intended to blow our minds. Right?
Wait, don't blow that for me. I didn't know that was going to happen. Something crazy?
In that regard, it's like a mystery.
And there's one more thing. It galled on me a little bit because...
Galled on you?
Yeah. I know.
Horrible. The only dad here saying that kind of thing.
It bothered me, but I have to realize that I am a product of my generation in this time. And there's things that he wrote about in his time that were expected, commonplace, or understood.
Yes, and they're going to seem out of place in our paradigm.
Yes, in our society, yes.
That's just the way it goes. But there's a reason that people still read this book. And I can't put my finger exactly on why, but I figure by the time we get to the end of it, we might have a better understanding. But also, this is a trilogy, and we're dealing with the first book in the set.
Yeah, well, if it came from a short story, who really cares how we read it, really?
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. So we are going to structure this discussion by breaking the individual sections down, kind of like we did with the previous book that we covered. For the first 3 episodes, at least, that's how it's going to be straight away. So our first episode that we're doing recording for right now is going to cover the first 8 chapters of the novel. It's about 40 pages long. Sometimes the chapters are preceded or followed by an excerpt from the Encyclopedia Galactica, which we will explain when it's revealed and it's appropriate to explain. But sometimes there are these excerpts that are flavor text. Also, that's very similar to the Gardens of the Moon. Blah. I don't think that needs more explanation. So we will cover those individually within their associated chapters. All right. Are you guys ready? Let's jump in. Part 1, the Psychohistorians. All right, so we begin with an excerpt from the Encyclopedia Galactica, 116th edition. Harry Seldon, born, died, his major contribution to the field of psychohistory, and the biography by Gall Dornick. Did you guys pull anything out of there that was worth mentioning?
The calendar. So just discussing the calendar, it is like 12,000 years in the galactic era, plus or minus, so on and so forth. But there is apparently a change there's a change in the calendar, and something's creating that. So you go from the galactic era to the Foundation era. And I don't really understand what that means at this point, but obviously it's something really pivotal in the history of human beings.
And the book is called Foundation.
That too.
So, all right, so let's jump into chapter 1, shall we? All right, so we have a country boy from the provincial planet of Synax with a newly printed PhD in mathematics on his way to Trantor to take a job with Harry Seldon. I like to say maths.
Maths.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people really the people that study maths are going to be very happy that we say maths.
Well, we're introduced to the character of Gul Dornick, and this is his first interstellar space trip. He's heading to Trantor, which is the heart of the Galactic Empire. And I think that we're supposed to understand that it's 12,000 years from now, essentially. These are humans we're dealing with 12,000 years into the future.
It's essentially almost the 12,000th year of the Galactic era. I don't know how they break up eras, but I would say that is like the founding.
Even further into the future than 12,000 years.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
Founding of the Empire, whatever that means. So it's far in the humans' future, much farther than 12,000 years from now. Farther than 12,000 years.
So
okay.
24,000 years in the future?
A long time.
We have no idea.
A long time into the future. A long time.
Well, I mean...
Well, okay, so I hypothesized this. So I was trying to figure... I did a little research, and I hate doing that, but I couldn't help doing it, so I was trying to figure out...
Work?
No, not work. Advanced knowledge of the book and the meanings and what's going on. I was looking at essentially the Foundation Wiki, whatever that means, and it says that the year was 19,482.
Yeah, I saw that as well. He said that there was some inconsistencies in his dating scheme. His calendar is not to be used as a scientific graduation.
That's interesting because he as in Asimov, tied together several of his books into a continuous world.
Yes.
There's overlap or references that go between books and series. So I don't know. I mean, I'm slightly disappointed that he wasn't consistent because Erickson never would have made that mistake.
All right, not Erickson though. Okay, so like something else that I think is clear from, or relatively clear from this first chapter, is that we're dealing with a galactic civilization, which is a mind-blowingly advanced civilization. No matter what you do, I forget 25 million planets, something like that.
Honestly, that's unbelievably mind-boggling. No, habited planets, not just inhabitable, habited planets. How do you keep track of all that? I mean, honestly.
They have to have a really good internet.
And it's got to be right in the middle of everything, I assume.
When you think about the scope, it's mind-boggling.
Yes, it is mind-boggling.
Somebody random person you meet on the bus says, "Oh, I'm from the planet Beelzebub."
Never heard of it.
Exactly. The odds of you meeting somebody from a planet that you know is virtually impossible.
But it's cataloged. Don't worry about that.
Yes, they've got to have AI. They've got to have really smart computers. You know, this stuff is not handled by people. It can't be, right? Can't be. It's too vast.
I mean, we have an entire planet. I mean, we're going to get into this in a moment, but we have an entire planet that's dedicated to basically
bureaucracy. Yes. It's a planet full of bureaucrats.
I mean, it's
up.
Crazy.
Blow it up now.
We haven't got there yet, but what did it say? There's like 75 billion people on that planet, or was it 40 billion? 75 billion? No, it's 40 billion.
I know what you're talking about. It's 40 billions, and the land surface area was 75 million square miles.
And I had to compare that to the Earth. We'll get back to that later.
I did that math as well, but he's not talking about the total spherical area of the planet. He's talking just about the landmass.
I just wanted to give it as a point of reference.
Okay, so for those of you who are familiar with the Kardashev scale, this is closer to a 3 than a 2 for sure, right? You think that's fair to say?
Wait, what?
A Kardashev... Philip, can you please explain to Yule concisely what a Kardashev scale refers to?
Probably not.
Okay, let's try.
What it refers to is created by, was it a Russian guy?
A guy named Kardashev.
Yes, a guy named Kardashev, who wanted to establish a ranking system for the evolution of civilizations. And a Kardashev 1 civilization is capable of harnessing all the energy from their own planet. And so planet Earth is right now, last time I looked at it, we're about a 0.79, a 0.78. So we're not even a 1. We can't even harvest all the energy from a planet.
We're not even on the scale yet.
Our Kardashev 2 civilization is capable of harvesting all the energy within their entire solar system.
So Dyson sphere capable civilizations.
Yep, very good. Exactly, Dyson sphere. And a Kardashev 3 civilization is capable of harvesting all the energy from an entire galaxy.
Woo! Galaxies are huge.
Is there like a moment in history, not real history, where that's been accomplished?
Wait, what now?
That scale 3?
K3? I mean, Dune is a K3 civilization, essentially.
Okay.
Asimov's Foundation, this world is a K3, essentially. There are others in science fiction, sure. But it's just a point of reference. Like, it's not real clear when you're reading this first chapter how big this galaxy, I mean, not the galaxy, but how big this civilization is. Like, it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around because it feels so familiar, right? We're reading this first chapter and it's just some bumpkin coming from a kind of a backwater planet heading to the big city to get a job.
Well, yeah,
right?
There's that moment where he wants to like be on the bridge basically as they're approaching Trantor. Yeah. And the dude's all, we're going to be going on the sun side. And,
you don't want to get
you're gonna
burned
get blasted
alive
with radiation and blinded and burnt. And not only that, but Trantor is really not the end game in this whole thing. And, that's like, it's all built up. This whole first chapter is like, dude's like, I'm going to the big city. I'm going to work with this guy and do what I went to school for. And he's all very gung-ho. And then he's immediately thrusted into this situation and he has to go to work. And it's very interesting. And I think it's very, very well done for the writer in this situation.
So let's talk about space travel.
Space travel?
Yeah. So they're able to jump long distances, but they're not able to jump all the way from Synax to Trantor.
So what are they doing, like little hopscotches of hyperspace or something like that?
Not sure. He did describe one time that it took 2 hours between jumps.
Well, I was kind of under the impression that this is like a Greyhound bus that goes from planet to planet to planet on a route and picks people up.
Oh, that would make sense.
I was thinking more of a train. But yes, I mean, I had a similar notion, and then I was trying to think back, like, what were the common tourist grade transportation systems of his era, and it would have been cruise lining boats, it would have been buses, it would have been trains.
He's going coach the whole way.
Yeah, but it does not take long. I mean, I think that's pretty clear in this chapter.
That's a bonus.
He did say he said it was a disappointment. He thought there would be something spectacular, but it was literally just like a slight flutter in his stomach, and then it was over.
Yeah.
Before he even could interpret it. But so we had talked about this before about why this portion was important, and other authors had brought up the concept of faster than light travel or going through hyperspace. But I think this is where Asimov actually kind of defined it for most future readers, and he portrayed it in a way that most people identify with from this point forward, and he even defined it very, very clearly. And he even coined the term to jump through hyperspace. How many times have you heard that in Star Wars? Oh, make the jump to light speed or jump to hyperspace. And Star Wars does it a little bit differently. It's not instantaneous, but I think if anybody out there can prove me wrong, I think he coined the phrase to jump into hyperspace.
Isn't the burden of proof on the person making the claim?
No.
Yeah, pretty sure it is. I like the way they describe it in Dune, where it's just a fold. Personally, that's the one I like the best.
Well, sorry, Frank Herbert described it differently, but it's the precise same thing, where it's like
folding space,
moving instantaneously across any distance.
That's a capability that they have in this civilization. They can just whoop, they're there essentially. I don't think it takes terribly long, but again, there was time between each jump, and he got progressively closer and closer to Trantor. And then, of course, he wasn't able to watch the planet as they descended, because one of those things that sticks out in older science fiction where they imagine, because like the first man in space was what year? 1961?
69.
First man in space was Yuri Gagarin.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Yuri Gagarin, 1961.
Okay, thank you very much. He had a little port window that he could look out, right? He didn't get fried. Yeah, but this is 1942. They didn't. I guess they didn't know,
Yeah, I guess not.
They couldn't have, right? They couldn't have. One of the things I noted about this chapter was that it was like super, super familiar, right? There was nothing in it that was like, oh, okay, well, I don't know what that is. Like, it all felt really familiar. And as I mentioned earlier, I had a little bit of a difficulty understanding how vast the civilization was, because it felt like it was just a story of some country kid going to get a job in the big city. So like Asimov made it very familiar to us, the reader, and I think that was on purpose.
Well, you want to invest in the person that you're, who your main character is, or at least what you assume your main character is.
Well, it's just a different attitude towards revealing information. Asimov wanted us to understand what we were reading, whereas some other authors that we've discussed in the past, they don't care. They know you'll pick it up eventually.
But that's after years and years of that type of material actually existing, that you have to do something different in a way so that other people will, not just say it's a tired version of something I've read before.
Yes, a trope.
Well, but if you think about it, if you go back to the bind sets, I don't think Werner von Braun had even invented the V2 rocket yet. And obviously nobody had invented the nuclear bomb yet. The level of our technology was so limited. The concept of going to space was unimaginable based on our technology at that time.
But he had the idea, and you see it early on, this idea that there is still video 3D screens, that people are going to be like paying
hyper video.
That's pretty awesome. So he has a technological advancement that we're not necessarily. It's not just like rocket ships going into space.
Did you get the feeling that this was a rocket?
I'm just saying that as a.
I did. I got the distinct impression that this was a rocket that he was on, traveling to another planet in. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know what I thought, actually. I don't. Now that I said rocket, it's just kind of like what you imagine old like sci-fi to be. Rocket ships and saucers.
Exactly. Aliens have saucers. We have rockets.
Yeah, exactly. It's the penis metaphor.
Yes, exactly. Very attractive.
And America is trying to get our semen into space. So yes, a rocket ship, I guess it is.
All right. You guys have anything to add to chapter 1?
So this is probably not for the show because it shows my stupidity. We have hyperspace, but he watched a hyper video. And hyperspace is an unimaginable region that was neither space nor time, matter nor energy, something nor nothing. One could traverse the length of the galaxy in the interval between two neighboring instants of time. What's hyper video again?
I took that to mean that they have a faster than light communications network.
So that's awesome. That's like better than 5G is what you're saying.
So he was saying that, even though he's from this provincial planet of Synax, he's still part of the Empire, right? Which means that they have some way connected it. And I would argue that we probably have a more connected world now, and we can understand this concept better than people in his era because of the internet. Mm-hmm. Because you can be, a kid growing up in, tiny town Texas, and you can still know what's hip on TikTok, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they have a similar form of communication throughout the galaxy. They must, and I'm assuming that they've got, when they say hyper video, that's what he means. It came from another star system, but they have it there as well.
That blows my mind that anybody would have even thought about this back then.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, that's what I mean. I think hyperspace and hypervideo go hand in hand. If you can move through space instantaneously, you can also communicate through space instantaneously. So hyperspace, hypervideo, they get real-time videos of something that's going on, soccer games, coronations, who knows what. But I did want to point out, Yul, that when you read the definition of hyperspace, if you look up hyperspace in Wikipedia, it references this quote right here as the hallmark definition, or one of the hallmark definitions of what hyperspace is.
Nice.
I remember buying books on how to write, so you get the science fiction one. Mm-hmm. And they're very adamant, don't go changing hyperspace and, all those warp drives and whatever, and stuff like that. It may be a made-up word, but it's accepted so
people
much
know what it means.
Everybody's going to be using it when it actually occurs. So don't be stupid.
Well, let me tell you from experience. The book I read most recently was Growing Up Weightless by John M. Ford. And the first half of that book, I was trying to understand what all of the terminology was. There's a huge element of realism that by the time we have permanent colonies on the moon and kids are growing up on the moon, the language will have changed drastically. True. The technology will have changed beyond recognition. And so there's a great element of realism in that book, but it was difficult to understand.
Right. Like my father went to a haberdashery to get clothes, but we go to...
What's a haberdashery?
Exactly.
It ain't the same kind of clothes either.
We go to the Gap.
Well, that's true, but you better create something a whole lot faster than hyperspace if you're going to be renaming that, is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. You mean hyperspace?
Exactly. If you're just going to forego hyperspace altogether,
it's
you
H
better
squared
get
space.
faster.
That's what it is. H cubed? Let's do H cubed space.
Exactly. I mean, and it also has to flow better. I mean, nobody wanted to say Betamax, obviously. VHS is better.
I like that word Betamax. I think it's great. But,
sure, it's a great character for a Disney movie, but for a videotape substitution, no, not at all.
So when it comes to reading, I am a big proponent of clarity. I like to understand what I'm reading. I don't mind having to work to understand it, but at the same time, like I do admire when you can take and invent new words and make it so it's like, oh yeah, I know exactly what he's saying, right? To me, that's the height of the art, to be able to create and invent and then still make it understandable in context. Because context is what does that, right? And Asimov may have coined some terms, and I know he did.
Robotics.
But this man, positronics, extraordinary clarity of meaning in his prose. Extraordinary clarity.
The very last paragraph of chapter 1, where he talked about childishness, and I thought that was...
Oh, you mean he was disappointed because he couldn't see the planet and he kind of choked up a little bit, almost like he cried?
Yeah, well, he did. He got choked. And I thought there's two parts to my thoughts there. One, it seemed appropriate that he was disappointed, but it also seemed out of place for a lot of reasons. One, he's supposed to be a grown man, and we all know that it's not okay for men to cry. But he said it was childish to feel disappointed, but childishness comes almost as naturally to a man as to a child. And I thought about that. I don't know if he was trying to make a greater point, because that doesn't seem to be his type of writing.
Based on, all 4 pages that we've read so far?
Yes, in my vast experience with Asimov.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. My wife calls me childish all the time, and I don't get it because I think I'm pretty mature. But that's where I say it's like childishness comes almost as naturally to a man as to a child. And he didn't say...
A man.
Yeah, a man. He didn't say adults. He said a man.
I would like to point out that if you just experience road rage one time, then you have experienced a grown man or woman acting like a child.
Yeah, anybody can do it.
So I think that's a true statement.
Well, yes, that's a true statement, but it seems like he didn't say people or adults. He said a man.
Whatever.
Well, he should be a little open to all genders. How's that? all forms of intelligence.
So, yes, just going on a tangent. So he had been criticized in his earlier writing for not writing much about women or writing women appropriately, or however you want to discuss it. But he said, I didn't because I didn't have any experience with women. I couldn't. I didn't relate. I didn't understand.
Well, there are no women in this book so far. So.
Not yet.
I mean,
that's right. Have we seen one?
None. None. I don't even know if there are any female passengers on this ship. Rocket, excuse me.
Oh, I think he did mention it one time.
Whatever. That's a joke, man. All right, so I would like to point out before we move on to chapter 2 that Gaul must be an extraordinary individual, because he was noticed by Harry Seldon on the imperial seat, running the Seldon project, like all of this stuff. Gaul was noticed. He was hired on by that guy, right? So I think that we're supposed to expect him to be very special.
If there's 25 million planets, untold billions of people, trillions, quintillions, I think is the word.
He would have had millions of applicants.
Yeah.
And this guy got hired.
Well, I don't know how the process goes.
Well, he did say he was hired, and that he had applied.
And he's going with his last amount of money, too. We'll find that out in chapter 2.
He's never had a job, man. Come on. His PhD was paid for, I'm sure, but, that barely covered his living expenses.
Yeah, he just got out of college, man. This guy is, like, broke.
Yep. And he wants to see Trantor, and he is disappointed that he cannot. Gal Dornick arrives on Trantor. Can one of you describe the immensity of the debarkation area to me? And mind you, this is where I got the notion that it was a rocket, because he said the long axis of the ship, and they were moving stuff around. And I'm pretty sure they have anti-gravity on the ship for the gimbaling, like when they're coming down and they're transferring the gravity from ship's gravity to planetary gravity, like the place where people are waiting around to get off the ship, and they're just walking around. So they have inertial dampers and all that kind of stuff. That part's moving around to adjust to the gravity, right? So it's independent. They have anti-gravity on the ship too.
Yeah, like people aren't even strapped in. They're just like milling about.
Da-da-da. Like on a boat.
Yeah, exactly. So you need to like really adjust that much, even if you're in. I don't know.
Well, I think when we're talking about the gravity and changing the orientation of the gravity to suit the people who are sitting on the ship waiting to debark, it's because the rocket's going to be coming down vertically, and it had been traveling laterally.
I see what you're saying.
And like maybe even going down vertically towards the planet, and then it has to turn around and land on its, on its plume. I mean, that's how I interpreted that. It might not be a rocket, but it just seems like it's got to be a rocket.
Anyway, it's thousands of people that are exiting. It just says thousands of passengers.
One of whom must be a woman, right?
There's got
to be at least one woman on this damn rocket.
Travel in the future.
Yeah.
Not on rockets, at least.
So describe the debarkation area to me.
You know what it sounds like, regardless of how large it is? It sounds like it sounds like any terminal, and I hate it, And
yeah, sure.
He goes and he gets his stuff rifled through.
Customs.
But it's expertly put together,
It's customs, man. This is just the way it goes.
It sounds like even in this future, we're going to still be stuck getting our shoes checked.
That's right. TSA is just as bad.
I don't know. I didn't really get that much. I mean, I see what you're saying. And, the science fiction aspect of it is kind of a little wonky for me. So I kind of passed over it just a little bit.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's important. He's trying to express scale to us, right?
Yes, for sure.
And one of the ways that he does that is by talking about the debarkation area and how the ceiling is visible, but it's almost lost to sight. It's so high up, and he can imagine clouds forming up there, and he can't see any of the outer walls. Like they recede into distance so far that it just blurs, and he can't see the far walls. That's how big this place is.
I see. I do recall all that. You're right. I kind of didn't expect it in this. It kind of feels like as he's like walking through and leaving is when he realizes that he's still really underground is basically it, right? Because at the end of this chapter, he's like, there's no sky, right?
At the end of chapter 1, the ship's steward had told him, you're not going to miss anything anyway by not seeing the planet because it's just going to be a blur of gray. Right. And we come to understand now that the whole thing is, it's underground and covered.
All right. So I remember when I would watch Church of the Subgenius videos, they have this thing like all of the earth is going to be cemented over.
Yeah, basically.
No one's going to live above.
Yes.
And this is what that reminded me of.
Right. So we really get a look at it in the next chapter. So we can discuss it more in detail there, like what's actually going on this planet. But right now, he's not seeing the sky. He's got his stuff through customs. He's hiring a taxi. He's being a yokel. He's gawking at everything. And then he gets in his taxi, and the taxi flies him to his hotel, which is the Luxor Hotel.
Yeah, the Luxor, huh?
Yeah. Wonder where he got that from. So importantly, though, he is followed immediately after leaving the customs desk. He picks up a tail, essentially. And so do you guys have anything else for this chapter before we move on to the excerpt from the Encyclopedia Galactica?
Did you notice that everybody working in customs was a man?
I mean, yes. They're like, he talks about men all the time. Men.
Yes, he said he saw no opposite wall, just men and desks.
I would remind you of what year this was written in.
1942.
Yeah, and beside the fact that there were a lot of women in the workforce because of the war, that was a quick change that happened. And then after the war, obviously, most of those women were laid off, and a lot of them, a lot of the men had to come back to work. But I don't think this is a surprise. Like, I think there were not very many women in the workforce that weren't secretaries or teachers at this time.
Well, if I mention it at all, I just want to mention it as to provide a cushion for modern mentalities of equality. And it's not, you don't see it here.
When they make the program, the miniseries, expect it to not just be men, is what you're telling me.
It's going to be diverse, dude.
Apple's and don't be upset about it, because this was just a thing that was then. And he's just, it's funny that he didn't see the future quite so well. In
so many ways, though. In so many ways. It's impossible. It's 80 years ago.
Like, you're asking me to talk about equality?
Yeah. I mean...
It's not my bag, dude. I just do the sci-fi stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
But, obviously it was many years later and predicated from all this stuff that went on beforehand. But Star Trek, obviously, had ladies on the bridge. No problem.
Yeah, uhura.
Yeah, one... and black, but that's a start, right?
She always touched that thing in her ear.
Yeah.
Captain, the ship is telling me this thing.
Yeah.
I am repeating it.
That was almost 20 years later, though.
It was,
Not to divert again, because I love doing it, is like Star Trek was one of those things that broke down barriers and broke down walls and did the things nobody else did.
Yeah, sure. Hey, what year was that first season?
Of Star Trek? I thought it was 57. I should know. So for everybody out there, I apologize.
Why don't we look it up?
I'm doing it right now. Star Trek, the original series. Do you hear typing?
I hear a mouse clicking is what I hear.
Oh, that's interesting because... oh, darn it. I keep going to the wrong one.
Can't be that hard.
You're just asking too much of me.
And we all know that it was Lucy Ball that was producer of that.
Was it Lucille Ball?
Yeah, her Desi Arnaz and her
1966 to 1967.
So oh wow, it wasn't even close. So I was off by a decade.
25 years later. All right, so enough of that. Yeah, let's cover the excerpt and then we'll move on to chapter 3. All right, so an excerpt from the Encyclopedia Galactica, subject Trantor. So there are 40 billion people on Trantor. 40 billions. And all 75 million square miles of land is covered by a single city. It is completely and utterly dependent on 20 agricultural worlds for food. It is considered to be in a untenable position, let's just say.
It doesn't sound good at all.
No. Precarious.
What happens if just one of those ships doesn't show up on that day?
I guess they're going to have to ration food. I don't know.
At that scale?
20,
it's going to be crazy.
20 planets just to feed
and this is daily. These ships come in.
Yeah.
I can't even process that kind of that thing. It's like the first time I wrote $1,000 check, That
for sure.
So,
well, just imagine the UPS or the FedEx of the future trying to accomplish this.
Wow, if this is the hub of the entire universe, basically, then this is that UPS station hub must be crazy.
Yeah, I imagine it is.
So, I talked about this earlier, but to put it in context, they said there's 75 million square miles of land surface, and Earth has 57.5 million square miles of land surface.
So it's larger.
Well, no, it just has more land surface. It doesn't say...
We did learn that it has a higher pressure and a higher gravity than Earth in that chapter.
No, it has a higher gravity than Synax.
Yes, Synax. Exactly. But yes, we have no idea how much ocean they have, though, so it's almost like a throwaway amount. We have no basis for comparison.
They don't tell us how large the planet is, only that the atmosphere is thicker, the gravity is greater than Synax, and they give us how much land surface. So
75 million square miles covered in one city.
That's and it goes under the oceans, right, along the beaches.
Yeah, we learned that next chapter.
Oh, did we? Okay, sorry.
It's okay. It's not really a spoiler. You know what I'm saying?
And just to clarify, as of yet, we don't know who is behind this Encyclopedia Galactica, right?
No, not yet. That's like the last thing we learn in this section.
But we do learn that this was the Encyclopedia Galactica referenced in this book was published 1,020 years in the future.
Yes. The publication date of the 116th edition, which is the one used for all of these excerpts, was published in 1020 FE.
Gotcha.
And it's now not yet the FE.
It's -1 FE.
No, because that's... okay. Is that when he... Okay, whatever. It doesn't matter.
It was a while ago.
Chapter 3, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so still wishing to see Trantor with his own eyes, Gal visits the observation tower at his hotel.
The only tour to check out the above land had already gone for the day, and he could do it tomorrow, but unfortunately
he's got work.
He has to meet up with Harry Seldon tomorrow. So what was it, like at the university or something like that?
The University of Trantor, yeah.
Exactly. Right. And so he missed the tour and is like, well, can I go up top? Is there something? And he sold a ticket. And he basically goes on this elevator and is stupid.
And has another huge blunder because he's a yokel.
He does.
From
He's
Synapse.
yokel again.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I'm sorry. There's like 40 billion people on this planet, and he goes to his hotel lobby and says, "Oh, I missed the space tour. Darn! Like there's no other places, right?"
Well, he only has so much time. I guess that's maybe what's going on there.
Do you remember when he was flying from the debarkation building to his hotel? It was hundreds of miles. He went through hundreds of miles of tunnels.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
It was really, really
and he
far.
was like really amazed at how the taxi driver knew which tunnel to go through. Because there was like a ton of them.
You know, like in my mind, I'm throwing away the taxi driver and I'm replacing it with an autonomous flying vehicle. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that's funny. That's a thing I had wondered about also. Yeah, sure. Well, there's a lot of people doing things that I don't think are going to be doing things in the future.
Unless they have come philosophically, they have, decided that there is some value in everybody working. There's a job for everyone. We don't care what you do. You have a job.
Well, on this planet, that might actually be the case because there are so many people that are doing so many things. There has to be other people doing things for those people, or else they die off. Other than the fact that they're getting everything shipped to them from everybody else along the galaxy.
Well, one of those examples is the elevator operator.
Right. Well, you got tens of thousands of people, maybe hundreds of thousands of people debarking at the debarkation room.
Yeah.
And your nearest hotel is like hundreds of miles away.
Yeah.
I call shenanigans.
That's fine. It's fine. I mean, I think it's an emphasis of scale. That's all he's really after. Is to give us the idea. Because notice it didn't take him very long to get there. His flying car got him there in no time.
Yeah, it's like one page, dude.
So, he went through those tunnels and boom, he's there. No big deal. But he blunders in the elevator. He doesn't notice that it's the newfangled type of elevator that really shoots you up quick. And so he lost his footing and he goes flying up. He's not touching the elevator walls or floor anymore. He didn't hook his feet like he was supposed to because he ignored the railings on the ground. And some guy helps him out. And he squawks, but he's being a yokel again.
I had to read this obviously more than once, but the reason he goes flying up is because the entire elevator and everybody in it is elevated not by electricity or anything, but by an anti-gravity field.
Regardless, he ignored the very obvious, he blundered in the elevator. And I think that's a teaching tool for Asimov to show us like, ooh, this is a neat gadget. Check it out. Like these elevators are this and that, this and such. And this is how he does it. He has his character like kind of blundering into encounters with this technology that he's unfamiliar with because we're unfamiliar with it as the reader and we're following his character. Nevertheless, he is helped down to touch back onto the elevator, and then they all debark at the top, the outlook or whatever, and he kind of catches his breath and looks around. And this, Yule, is where it is revealed that the entire city is covered by man-made structures.
He said steel.
Yeah, he meets this guy who like lets him in on all this information, Gerald. And
he's like, not his last name.
Not his last name. That's my first name. And Gull introduces himself, but Gerald asks him how high up they actually think, he thinks Gull thinks he is.
Yeah.
And he's, we must be like a mile or two, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, we're like 50 feet up.
It was 500 feet.
Was it 500?
I thought so.
Whatever. It's not a lot. It's not a mile.
No.
But that elevator ride was a long way.
They were deep underground. Deep
And
underground.
he compared it to an iceberg.
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't get the impression that the rocket landed in a submerged way on the planet. That the debarkation station. I didn't get the impression that it was deep underground, but maybe they flew deeper, underground from there. I don't know, but
well, the thing is that he didn't get to see the landing, so we don't either.
Oh, that's true. That's
that was a very clever writer's ploy. Like, I don't want to describe this, so we're just going to close the window.
Well, you're gonna burn your face off if you look, you fool.
Yeah, we got a pretty good idea that he was gonna die if he looked at it. So, heaven forbid. All right, so this Gerald character that helped him out on the elevator and is giving him all this information, he's like, "Hey, you're not from around here, are you?"
They're just philosophizing about the planet, and he's just like, when people from Chantor come up here, they get the nerves. It wigs them out, and they panic, and they get afraid because they can't stand seeing the sky because they never see it. And this is traumatizing to me. Gull says, "The nerves? Why?" I think it's glorious. And Gerald says, "It's a subjective matter of opinion. If you're born in a cubicle and grow up in a corridor and work in a cell and vacation in a crowded sunroom, then coming into the open with nothing above you causes you to have a nervous breakdown." And I think about that, and I don't know. It's like, how could you live your life without ever seeing the sky? To me, that's traumatizing.
It would be easy.
It's like the allegory of the cave, right? There's the people that leave. Sometimes going out and finding something and then coming back is the worst. Because then you're like around all these other people that don't even want to experience it to begin with. And you don't want to go back out because there's no one else to go with you.
He talked about earlier about seeing people standing in like sunrooms, apparently to get the vitamin D they need.
Sure.
Yeah, it's artificial radiation.
Now they said that once a year the kids come up so that they can experience it.
And scream their heads off.
At least in the first few times. Yeah. I like that, but usually it's just the Richies that come up above ground, I guess it sounds like. And they're like barges and things.
Right.
I think of like Jabba the Hutt when I think of that, the big old skiff that he's on.
Oh, Jabba's sail barge or whatever it is.
Exactly.
So their conversation turns to Harry Seldon, but he doesn't call him Harry, he calls him Raven Seldon, because he's been making dire predictions. And I would argue that it's not obvious to Gull necessarily, but he's being interrogated by this guy, Gerald.
Well, it wasn't obvious to me either at the time. I completely
You didn't notice the sly look in his eye, and he's like really eager to get the information out of him. Yeah.
I didn't get it, mostly because I thought he was just this rude New Yorker. Like he's bored, but he wants to make conversation, but he's not really polite about it.
Well, he does annoy Gull, and Gull doesn't really want to talk to this guy anymore, so he picks up himself and he heads back to his hotel room.
Where he meets Harry Seldon.
What are you doing in my room? Who are you? Oh, you're Harry Seldon.
Is this just a ridiculous, like, Hollywood trope, like, right now? I mean, how did Harry Seldon get into his hotel room? Why is he just sitting there? Don't they have, like, security protocols?
Plus, he went to the closest one from the rocket ship.
Closest hotel.
We all know that's where the strip clubs are, so the Luxor is obviously in the bad part of town. If it's the closest one 100 miles away. So, it shouldn't be hard getting in that room, you know what I mean?
That is so intuitive of you.
Yeah. From long experience. An excerpt from the Encyclopedia Galactica, Psychohistory. So psychohistory is a field of mathematics studying human society's reaction to social and economic stimuli. There is a lower population limit for statistical accuracy, and that society being analyzed must not be aware of it.
And that's all defined by Gal Dornick.
And them's the rules.
And them's the rules.
Just to sidetrack a little bit, so I actually went and looked at see if psychohistory was a real thing, and it's not, but it has a virtually identical comparison. And so I looked at the comparisons between psychohistory and something called cliodynamics. Mm-hmm. And at this point, cliodynamics sounds exactly like psychohistory, but psychohistory incorporates individuals directly, how they impact societal dynamics. The way I interpret the description is that, okay, so we look at society, we look at all these cultural facts, we look at the trends, but then what does the power of one person or a few people have to change the course of future history? And that's where I think they incorporate that.
It sounds like that stupid thing that Jeff Goldblum did in Jurassic Park. With chaos theory and stuff like that.
Chaos theory is a real thing, man.
I'm sure this sounds like maybe not a predecessor, but
well, that's what I'm getting at. Cliodynamics is the same thing too, and basically it's the same thing. It's the same thing as psychohistory.
It's examining what the butterfly's effect actually has to do with everything else, right?
No, I think it's the opposite. It's looking at the entire population on how it acts.
Okay, I see what you're saying. But it's in such a large scope, everything that he's talking about. It's so hard to even anyway.
It is hard to fathom. And I mean, how do you apply that to 25 million worlds?
Well, there's a mathematical equation, obviously, because he has the calculator to prove it. Okay.
Let's actually get to chapter 4, and then we can talk about it.
Oh, we are in chapter 4.
So the conversation between Harry Seldon and Gul Dornick from the previous chapter continues in chapter 4. So he's interested in talking to Gul Dornick, first of all. Like, he introduces himself, and he's like, hi, blah, blah, blah. But Harry Seldon's there for a very particular reason, and he kind of tests Gul Dornick's knowledge. And I would say that this is the first chapter where we get a kind of a counterpoint to Gul Dornick's character. For the previous 3 chapters, we've seen him as a yokel, blundering about, gawking, etc., like being kind of out of his depth. But this chapter, when he's talking to Harry Seldon, he's in his element. And Seldon admires his quick thinking, as it were, a number of times in this chapter.
And not just mathematically, but also philosophically, I think is kind of what you mean. Is that what you mean?
Roughly, yes. So, like, in the previous chapter, Gerald had said Raven Seldon predicts disasters. And now we're finding out what the disaster that he predicted is. Like, it has trickled out into the public, and now we find out that Harry Seldon mathematically can prove the fall of Trantor in 3 centuries' time.
I think to describe it a slightly different way is a good mathematician can solve an equation and find a number, but a great mathematician can see the number and realize what that number means.
What else do we learn here?
Gul realizes that his education is not over because Harry says to him, before you are done with me, young man, you will learn to apply psychohistory to all problems as a matter of course.
Right.
He had immediately questioned him, and then that was his response. And then he is very happy that Gul is...
He thinks for himself.
Not just a yes man. He questions his math.
Right.
And then he gives his example and reason for why it works, and then he's okay with it because you can never really know, it sounds like. This is a guess. Some of this is a guess. As we find out later, it's not much of a guess.
He's making predictions using math.
Yeah, but what I am especially want to say is that the learning isn't over. The thing I found in this chapter is that Gul is back in education mode. He's questioning, he's answering, he's coming up with, he was befuddled earlier. Like you said, out of his element. He's a yokel. But now is when, the thinking is beginning.
Very familiar territory when dealing with, but he is dealing with a master.
Etienne brought it up that this is the time for Gul to show his stuff. In fact, he was tested in weird ways. So Seldon pulls a calculator out of his fanny pack, and he shows Gul the equation, but he doesn't let them look at it.
He lets them look at it. He doesn't let them touch it.
Yeah, he lets them see the equation. And these are like differential equations, which are difficult if you've never done those before, and difficult if you have done those before, or impossible if you've never done them before. Point is, to do it in your head is extraordinary. And he's looking at all of these different, I guess, variables to come up with an answer. And he almost bullseyes it. And Harry Seldon says, oh, that's not bad. It's not bad.
It's not good, but it's not bad.
Well, I bet he did it in his head. That's pretty good.
No, he's sharp. He's really, really sharp. He's probably one of the sharpest out there. And I wonder if Harry Seldon predicted him with his psychohistory. He's like, there will be one from Synax who will come and write my biography. Excerpt from the Encyclopedia Galactica, Commission of Public Safety. Once an agency of order, the Commission has degenerated into an instrument of the status quo. The Commission's decline can be traced to the trial of Harry Seldon. Chapter 5. So Gal Dornick is detained for questioning by the Commission for Public Safety.
Yeah, he's locked in his room.
Yeah, he's locked in his room and then taken to another location. And at that other location, he answers some questions, and then he asks for his lawyer. And I have to say, please do it the other way around if this ever happens to you. Okay?
Are you speaking from experience?
Ask for a lawyer first. Always ask for a lawyer first.
I can confirm, yes, you should not say anything until you've talked to a lawyer. But they're trying to break him down, and they're asking these questions over and over again. They're leading on him. And the thought that came to my mind is that this Commission of Public Safety is just like the Gestapo.
It's worse than we can probably imagine, because notice they locked him in his hotel room.
I interpreted that to mean that's just a security protocol, which is like, hey, detained person in room 17B, done.
Yeah, but that's kind of unheard of, right? A hotel in the United States would not lock you in your room because the police told them to. They would let you leave, and then the police would have to arrest you, right? Or the police could come in if they had a warrant and they could arrest you there. But the hotel actually locked him in his room. And then they came and they took him away. So it's all integrated. Yes, they completely control it. It's a, I don't know if a tyranny is the right term for it, but it's certainly that kind of a, it gave me that kind of a feeling.
Yeah, it's Big Brother plus a Gestapo.
So while he's answering questions that he shouldn't answer, he asks for a lawyer, and one is sent to him by Harry Seldon, a man named Lors Avakim.
He puts a pocket recorder down.
He puts down a pocket recorder that also casts a static field to block the spy beam that they're using to eavesdrop on their conversation, or will be using to do that. So there is no appeal to the Emperor, but Gaul is like, I tell the Emperor that I've been arrested. I'm a citizen of the Emperor.
It doesn't work that way anymore.
And my God, seriously, there's 25 million planets, and this guy says, call the Emperor. He'll we'll get to the end of this. Honestly, if you're in England and the cops pulled you in.
Call the Queen.
Exactly. What do you say? Call the Queen? No.
Yeah.
Well, that's what an American would probably do. So, yeah, that's what you do.
Lors said this is not... What was the name? There was a name that was thrown in there, like a previous emperor's last name.
Chen?
No, I think it was the Endens.
Okay, so he said essentially that this is not an empire run by that family. That stuff does not happen anymore. You no longer have recourse to the emperor, to a petition to the emperor, which would obviously not be heard by the emperor his or herself, right? But Nevertheless, there is no recourse. This is the way that it's going to go. And so a lot of information is delivered to Gaul here. Good old Gaul is like, couldn't he have predicted that this was going to happen? And Lors tells him that, yeah, he did actually. He can predict out 1,500 years, and he definitely predicted that you were going to get arrested.
And that's the reason why he visited you, to make it happen, actually.
Yeah, because the CPS wasn't acting at the time scale that he wanted. So he nudged them into action. He forced their hand, and so they arrested them both.
Is psychohistory also just what is it called when you think something's going to happen and you actually make it happen?
No, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Self-fulfilling prophecy. Thank you very much. Was his action of meeting him a shrewd thing to get them moving, or was it just obvious that was going to happen? They were already tailing him.
I thought so.
You can put all the numbers you want, but when you start putting your hands in there, it's like It's adding a different element that's more than just, your numbers, right?
Well, that's what I think Selden is doing. Is so he's got these predictive models that are apparently very good. And so he knows exactly what's going to happen. And so, or theoretically, more or less. And then he's like, oh, that's not quite what I want to happen. And then he nudges future history in the direction that he wants to achieve his ends.
That's very powerful then.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Their conversation is interrupted when an agent of the CPS shows up and takes away their static field recording device.
And, I'm leaving anyway.
We're done here. The trial of Harry Selden proceeds in a closed courtroom. In attendance only the barons of the Empire and 5 members of the Commission for Public Safety.
Chief Commissioner Chen is there.
Yes.
And he's silent.
I think it's revealed that Chen is actually the Emperor, and that the child that is called the Emperor is a puppet.
And they really glossed over this. It's like one sentence or a very short sentence. Technically, there's an emperor, but this is the emperor that is putting you on trial. So he got his wish. He wanted to speak to the emperor, and he effectively is.
So, I understand why this is going on from a story standpoint, because it's easier for Asimov to write this scene with Gall there, but Gall shouldn't be there. This is the trial of Harry Selden. They would have arrested Gall and thrown him in a cell somewhere and just left him there to die, right?
Well, I guess you're right. Maybe they wouldn't be tried together, but there's some sort of sedition going on between the two of them. At least that's what they're trying to make it out to be.
Sure, but there are people already on the planet that work for Selden that would have been better to question, I think,
maybe
than this kid that just showed up from
but
Synax.
It was the argument that the prosecutor is trying to make is that you're saying 50 are in your employ, but here we have a number 51.
50 mathematicians.
Right. And then he's all, well, wait a second. We were talking about 100,000 people.
Yeah.
And it's all very it's important to do that because they're trying to
But Gall doesn't even need to be in the room for that. You understand?
Say what?
They don't need Gall to be in the room for that conversation.
I understand that. What I'm saying is that I guess maybe possibly they're being tried together. I don't know why.
Well, we don't fully know what the laws are there, but I think
the CPS is the law. That's the law there.
All right. Well, Gall is here because he's naive. He's already sold out Selden.
Yeah, he did.
Everybody who's already in the Selden project would immediately know not to talk to the Gestapo. But here we have this kid, right off the turnip truck, and he's like, oh yeah, well, this is what he said. He's trying not to, but they outmaneuver him. It's the same thing. Put him on a stand, and a lawyer will just eat him alive.
Well, they mainly aimed the lawyers at Harry Selden because that's the whole point, is the trial of Harry Selden, not the trial of Gall Dornick. They want to know the size of his organization, and they end up understanding that the total number of people working for the Selden project is close to 100,000. There are 51 mathematicians once Gall is hired on, but for the most part, it's about 20,000 families.
Well, I think just to paint what you just said a little bit differently, yes, Harry Selden is on trial, but what this really is, it's the trial of every single person who's worked on his project.
Which becomes very apparent later. Yeah.
All their lives are possibly forfeit, and we know that Gall's is for sure in this situation.
Well, Gall has a 77% chance of getting out of this unscathed. That was revealed in the previous chapter by Lores.
Only a 1% chance of being executed or something like that.
Right. Only 1%.
Oh, phew.
Well, anyway, so the trial continues. They have figured out the size of his project. They convince him to explain again what his prediction, the destruction of Trantor. It's repeated here, and then they're trying to get him to admit treason. Essentially, that's the gist of it. But they want to know the purpose of his project, which is finally stated to us. So, what is the purpose of his project?
To write a book.
It's not to prevent the fall of Trantor.
He wants to create the Encyclopedia Galactica, which is the sum of all human knowledge, as much as you can say. For us, it's the same thing as Wikipedia.
No, because there's a lot of stuff behind paywalls that Wikipedia doesn't have. A lot of the universities do their own research, and there's paywalls, and you can't get that. You can refer to that stuff on Wikipedia, but you can't get to it on Wikipedia.
Good point.
It's literally all human knowledge.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Let's go beyond Wikipedia to classified information, technologies, patents.
It's your birth certificate.
It's the Library of Congress, but more.
It's everything.
It's everything. It's the Library of Alexandria times 12,000.
Because Selden cannot prevent the fall. Nothing can prevent the fall. It can be hastened, but it cannot be prevented. And the time between the rise of the second, the following civilization, he wants to shorten that from 30,000 years to 1,000 years. And this is how he plans to do it. Encyclopedia Galactica.
But seriously, and that's why, okay, so this is why they're trying to suppress him, is because he's got this doom and gloom prediction that apparently carries some weight and credibility.
If it gets out there that so we said that it got out there, but it's only getting out there to the aristocracy, right?
He leaked it.
But
Guaranteed he leaked it.
Normal Joes don't know anything about it, because if they do, they're going to just cause all sorts of problems that are going to hasten it, and it would not be a good thing. And also it's sedition. You're talking about stuff that normal people don't know about and that we should just ignore and keep going on with, because our existence is our existence,
Kind of like climate change.
It's very much like climate change. I mean, look, I don't know anything about science. I just know that if we ignore one thing, worse stuff is supposed to happen than if we do the other thing. It just would be a little bit better. What's the worst that could happen? But I think that about a lot of things, and people hold on tighter to their guns.
The Emperor, Ling Chen, said that you, sir, are disturbing the Emperor's peace. And I think that's mainly what he's concerned with, that this guy is causing trouble, and that's why he's on trial. The following day, Selden enters private negotiations with the Commission of Public Safety, as he predicted.
To preface this a little bit, they're no longer in trial. They're in a secret meeting that has nothing to do with the trial. This is like a private meeting.
The trial is over. They're offered cigars, in fact.
Yeah, they're like negotiating, plea bargaining, whatever. This is called a settlement agreement.
Yes, but he had predicted that this was going to happen. They're going to negotiate with him, and here we are. But Ling asks, why not just kill you? Why shouldn't I just kill you right now? You're disturbing the peace.
Well, Selden has a mathematical equation telling him how long he's going to live if he were to be executed.
That, and he'll hasten the fall of Trantor not to 300 years, but down to 50.
Right, and this is the concept that, like, if more people find out about Harry Selden's philosophy, his trial, all of it, they'll get wind of this, and it's just going to cause a massive reverberation.
But he is disturbing the Emperor's peace, so he is given the option of exile or death.
And I'm immediately thinking Wrath of Khan right off the bat. Or more in line to Star Trek, where they land Khan's people on this planet that's going to be very habitable. Everything's going to be great. And although you won't be around that library that is so very important to you, you're going to have free will, basically, to keep doing as long as you keep out of that naughty stuff.
Are you talking about the planet that they're being sent to?
Well, I mean, that's the offer that's being given to Harry Selden. You're going to go to this planet with all your people. You're going to get the F out of here, and I don't want to hear from you. Basically.
Yeah. No more disturbing the peace, essentially.
And he gives him an or else. He's like, you got 5 minutes to make this decision, or else you're going to be killed.
He's like, you have 5 minutes, but let me go on a monologue for a while.
Right.
Start the timer now.
All right, so there's this part where Chen says, since I do not believe in so many things, talking about the fall of the Tarantor, it is not difficult for me to disbelieve in the fall as well. And I'm like, that is so politics, right?
Yeah, sure.
It's like, this is this, and this is this, and since it's that, I can get away with this.
Right. He wouldn't even be lying.
Exactly.
I think you nailed it. Absolutely. Sure.
Except the encyclopedia we know is actually written. So.
Yeah, exactly.
And not only that, but Gall's biography of Selden is very important to it.
Right.
So it looks like things ultimately end up okay.
There is a little bit of a question because it is more than 1,000 years into the future that the edition that we have been getting excerpts from was published. Like that was published in 1020 FE, but like we know the FE transition happened. So that's an optimistic thing to look forward to. But whatever. It's still not all completely answered, but it doesn't seem like it's as pessimistic as it could be, right?
There's a little bit of like a dark foreshadowing here. The name of the planet they're going to send him to is Terminus, which means
it's the border.
The end.
It's on the very edge of the galaxy. And he's like, oh, Terminus? Jeez. And defeated, Harry Seldon accepts exile. Back at the University of Trantor, soldiers inform Seldon he and his people are under martial law, and they have 6 months to prepare for their departure to Terminus.
They can't move that many people all at that time. 6 months.
Yeah, that's Gal Dornick, and Harry tells them to shush, shush, shush. Let's get back to my office. It's spy-proof. There they continue their conversation. Turns out that he wasn't defeated. Harry Seldon was not defeated. They were looking for exile. They wanted the planet Terminus.
Well, they kind of chose it. It was like, it sounded like they knew it was an option and they were kind of like shooting for it. There were other planets that they were hoping for also.
But Terminus was
one of them.
It was desired, he said. And they've already been working on getting out of here for 2.5 years. So that 6-month period of time, no problem. They've got it in the bag, right? He's predicting the future once again. So why? This to me was the most kind of like terrifying thing. Like we've already talked about, the CPS is this organization that's got, a authoritarian stranglehold on the empire. But why did he want to be exiled?
Well, he says that he has basically autonomy now.
He does.
He has the emperor is placated.
Yep. He doesn't have to worry about disrupting anything. He can just work in peace.
Well, it's like Yul said. It's like Khan. It's like it's better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven.
Yeah, but did you guys notice that he said that the 20,000 families wouldn't have traveled to Terminus without force?
That's what it was, yeah. That was another thing.
So he instrumented this entire thing because his workforce wouldn't have followed him to another planet. He exiled them as well because he wanted his will, right? He wanted his way.
So you got to look at this from two different ways. Like one, he has a goal, right, to preserve humanity or humanity's future. That's very altruistic. But the other side of that is his seemingly absolute lack of compassion for what it takes to get there.
His methodology is bad.
Yeah, there you go.
But he got his way.
Well, like if I have to do bad things to make a good thing happen, did I do bad things?
That's the ends justifies the means argument.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we're kind of seeing that right now.
Yeah, well, I guess the ends do justify the means because it's 30,000 years of chaos and horror, or 1,000.
We're only on the first part of the first book, but
early days.
I don't know. Seeing what happens in the very end and how it all comes out is very interesting.
Right.
Well, just to imagine that about how bad it can get. Maybe he's done his predictive models, and you're talking about like quintillions of dead.
There's a moment where he is asked about science in the Inquisition, and he says scientific truth is beyond loyalty and disloyalty.
This is when they accused him of treason for stating a mathematical proof. Basically.
Exactly, and I'm just like, what I'm thinking is that when it's just numbers, it sometimes obscures the humanity.
Sure.
I take a look at COVID, and I look at the sheer number of people, and it's a lot of people, but when you look at the full number of everybody, it's not... It's like a drop in the bucket type thing, a lot of people will say. In sports, analytics is a big deal. And it's all numbers. And, I got to shift my infield here because this guy hits this kind of pitch here. And it all works out all the time up until the point when it doesn't. And then they remove somebody from a game. And then all hell breaks loose because someone didn't take into consideration how people feel.
How does this relate to psychohistory?
Well, I think what Yule's saying is that Harry Seldon has broken down the future of the human species into a mathematical equation, and he's working the equation and not caring about the people.
That's what I think I am saying too.
Yeah. All right. Nicely said. Nicely put, Yule.
Well, one more thing. When you talk about this, is essentially Harry Seldon has a predictive model, and I was just thinking of something my modeler said, not my modeler, but my modeling instructor in college, is that all models are wrong, but some are useful.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds very good.
Don't models you build off of an existing model all the time, right?
You can, not necessarily. I would say every model is standalone, but it bases itself upon certain amounts of knowledge. And as you increase your knowledge, you can improve your model. For instance, like the modeling I do is based upon the laws of physics. That hasn't changed. The inputs into that model do change. I don't know. I guess what I'm really getting at it is, from a modeling standpoint, the variables and complexities that he is claiming to factor into account aren't really possible.
Well, yeah. I mean, yes, obviously.
Without obscene AI devoted to studying these things.
Well, maybe Harry Seldon is an AI. I mean, he's obviously extraordinary in a galactic civilization, right? Among so many people, he's special. So let's finish the chapter and then we can have a general discussion, though, yes? So Seldon says that not only are they already prepared to leave, essentially, but there is going to be a second scientific refuge that will be established at the other end of the galaxy. That's in quotes, by the way, at Star's End. And Gaul will see more than he does. Seldon will die soon. A successor will be appointed, will apply the final touches, instigate the revolt on Anacreon, and let the rest just happen. Most will leave, some will stay, he says, referring to the planet of Trantor. Either way, he is finished. And that is the end of Section 1, The Psychohistorians.
A revolt?
Yeah, it sounds like he's able to predict the future pretty specifically, right? He already knows that there's going to be a revolt on a particular planet, and that is going to be the end of his plan. Like, he's planned out 1,500 years. It sounds like... I mean, that was revealed to us by Lors, the lawyer, right? The solicitor. He said that he can predict 1,500 years out. And here at the end, he's saying that at some point in time, there will be a revolt on a particular planet, and then they can wash their hands of it. They're done, right? But right now, he's already done because he's only going to live for another year or two. That's that. All right. So, how do you guys take it? How do you guys feel about this book that's basically 80 years old that we have begun today?
Well, I like the fact that it feels, it feels like something beyond me in scope. I like that it's big. I don't know. I appreciate the fact that he's having to put forth all this information in front of us in a stylistic way, in the best way he can, in the most entertaining way he can. And like us, Gaul is going into this situation for the very first time. Obviously, a sort of fish out of water type situation. I enjoy it. I thought it was pretty good.
I really like the scale. It's just like a game I play where I'll kind of close my eyes and try to imagine the stuff that's going on in the background, like the stuff that he's not specifically describing. Like if you look at the cover of the book, like the Michael Whelan cover, which I think is the one you've got on the screen right there, Yul.
Oh, that one, yeah.
If you look at that, like it's very clear behind him that is an extraordinary civilization. The technology that they have is amazing. It's guaranteed to be amazing. He described the rocket, or the ship is all he referred to it as in the very beginning, as 12,000 years of imperial technology and design. So it's like the state of the art, and their state of the art would be mind blowing. And I love that stuff. I love the far future stuff immensely. The science fiction of this era, though, has a tendency to kind of put me off a little bit, just because I always feel like the characters aren't well established, and the point never was the characters in the first place. It was the story. And I'm a character guy. I like having my mind blown. I like good stories, but I really like to follow humans through those stories, or whatever, some conscious entity. I don't care if it's a robot, so long as they behave like a
I think we
conscious
get a
entity.
pretty good Gaul chapter. I mean, this is a good Gaul section of the book.
It's okay.
I don't know if we're gonna get
it's
more.
okay.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's rudimentary. I mean, I really did like, he snaps on his collegiate, style when he has to immediately. When he's being interrogated by the Inquisitor, he is very cagey in the way he is responding, even though he is giving information. He's also getting information from that person. So even though he's rubish, he snaps back into who he has to be. He's with it. By this
kind
time.
of is, but he still gives up the information that they wanted from him.
He does, but I don't think that information was really all. I mean, it was enough to get them.
Could have been a bluff. The guy said, we're listening to your conversation anyway, so you might as well just tell me. And I would be like, well, you already know. And that's what he said, is like, well, then you already know what was said in that room, and that should have been enough. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, I mean, the only characterization we get is Gaul is a guy who came from...
He's a bumpkin.
He's a bumpkin. Smart guy.
Oh, yeah.
A sightseer at the very beginning, and then right back into, I'm getting my job.
Yep, he's on the university campus again.
I mean, I'm defending his characterization a little bit, but for the most part, I agree with you. There's nothing that really stands out that makes me think, oh, this is gonna be my favorite character in all of novels.
Yeah, no, I didn't like him or dislike him immediately. Like, I mean, fine. I noticed that he was gawking, and then I noticed how sharp he was in chapter 4. But at the same time, like, I didn't like the guy.
As far as the character that I'm going to follow through the book, I think he's perfectly okay.
He's serviceable. Selden's kind of the same way, though. Selden has some scenes where he's able to say some really smart things. He's got some good dialogue to like convince people of arguments or whatever, and that's satisfying on a level, but it's not satisfying on a character level.
That courtroom scene in the miniseries is going to be great, though.
I bet it is. Yeah, I bet it is.
It's going to be. Everybody's going to be gripped by everything he has to say.
Buddy.
It's going to be like the final culmination of what this guy is all about right here. And then there's even that little bit more where you find out that, oh my God, he chose Terminus all that time ago.
What?
This guy's awesome. Those will be
alert.
some like cool moments for people that are watching only, I think.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I mean, I am truly. I really wanted to read this book before the show came out. It's kind of like when The Hobbit was coming out. I was like, oh, I need to reread that real quick so that I can watch the movie and be like, oh, have the best of both. Because I like to read more than I like to watch. It looked really beautiful, and I was like, I should watch this. I want to watch this, so let's go ahead and get this out of the way now. So when Philip suggested it, I was just like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go 80 years back. Whew.
There was one moment also in the book where it says humanity. And in the audio, it did say man, just for another one of those, Philip. Just to let you know.
All right.
To boldly go where no one has gone before.
This is definitely a little bit more of an updated version.
Well, for my part, I mean, because you guys were on a roll, I didn't want to interrupt, but I like reading these, like, ancient, by our standards, these seminal books that were so influential from this point going forward. And so when I read it, I see those connections. Like, for instance, you got this planet-wide city. I mean, there's just it's controlling an entire empire, and there's like Coruscant in the Star Wars universe, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then you've got this prescient person who is, I guess, hunted in some way, predicting the downfall of an empire. And Paul Atreides was the same thing in this galaxy or universe-spanning empire. I just see a lot of similarities when it comes to the literature. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's nice to see how it's all interconnected, but it is like it's a river through time, whatever, and it goes through time, and there's changes made, and it's nice to be familiar with all of those things.
Yes, right? Yes, and you had these great authors that like perhaps were like influences by idea, but then like spun it to be unique to their own literary universe, and I think it's beautiful when you start putting all those pieces together and figuring out where it all came from.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's nice. It is really nice. Well, anyway, do you guys have anything that you'd like to add or anything else you'd like to talk about when it comes to these first 8 chapters, or, just Asimov or this book and series on its own?
I'm still jazzed. I'm excited about reading this. It's been on my list for a long time, and I'm happy. I can't wait to see how it turns out.
I mean, you can tell right now there's a lot of possibilities. And a lot of the possibilities I have are formed from all the stuff that I've seen in my life that might be like science fiction or, fantasy. Fantasy is just a different type of sci-fi, really. I'm just joking.
They feel so different, though.
It does. What I mean is, like, we're advancing plot. We're trying to follow these characters.
Narrative.
Exactly. And I've seen a lot of it. A lot of elements from everything pulled and pushed and thrown in and just shoved in other mediums and video games, all that stuff. And it's definitely making me excited for what's going to happen in this book. Hopefully it will pay off in that way.
Yes. It's
like watching Goodfellas and those type of gangster movies before watching the big
Godfather.
Couldn't even say it. Godfather. All these elements from this movie are in all these other aspects, and it almost looks like the ultimate cliche when it was really the first. That type of thing.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good movie too. It's a really good movie.
Well made.
Yeah, no, it's definitely.
Well, definitely a good chapter for a guy who's like so science. He's got his degrees and all that stuff. He writes a pretty good book. I thought it was a good first chapter or part.
All right, so join us again on the 9th of February for episode 2, where we'll be covering section 2. What is section 2 about? It's the
historians, I think.
It's the encyclopedists.
Oh, I'm sorry, the encyclopedists.
Until then, thank you for joining us. Keep reading, everyone. We'll see you in the next one.
Bye, all.
Whatever the music is.